Christine Perey, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Zach and the AWE team for inviting me to talk about AR Cloud. I've been a founding member of the Open AR Cloud, an association that met for the first time and was on the podium in a panel discussion in 2018. Some of you in the audience were on that panel with me, and we kind of took off and done a lot of exciting things. I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a minute. I proposed this talk because I think it's hard for people to convert their concepts into businesses. And this is intended to support those of you who are looking for customers and looking for partners. So let's start with a lot of visual noise, right? I mean, this is kind of all these new logos that you haven't seen that much before. In fact, with the exception of a few big, easily recognizable logos, a lot of those are new. They're startups. It's a very exciting ecosystem, but it's also very risky. And people are just, it's kind of like a cloud, but it's a storm cloud. Not really sure if it's going to get sunny and bright and clear, or if it's going to get, if it's going to rain. So I was at AR Cloud. I was thinking, you know, each one of these companies whose logos you've seen there are using a different word for AR Cloud. So I started going and looking for some of the words that they use, and I found that there's this song called Mirrorverse, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. There's also, you know, a heavy metal band called Mirrorverse, and we call it lots of other things. You know, you've heard of the multiverse, and I spent, you know, an hour probably researching all these names and looking them up, and yeah, there was the metaverse and cloud AR, which is not the same thing as AR Cloud, and we could spend a whole session just getting confused in these terms. And I thought I owe you the respect to define what I'm talking about and what I hope the rest of this ecosystem will be talking about. All right, so I'm clicking but not advancing. So that means that, oh yes, and then there was Kevin Kelly's article about the mirror world. Isn't that noisy? Isn't that just like get your attention? And he wrote an excellent article, and that was the graphic on the cover of Wired magazine. Let me give you a break from that so your brain can clear. And you know, have I neglected any other buzzwords that could be used to define AR Cloud? Yes, I did. There was the magic verse from Magic Leap, right? So there are all these terms, and they really do sort of signify something similar. So what is it we're talking about? Ori Inbar introduced the term about September 2017, and he said, in essence, what we're talking about is a persistent digital 3D copy of the physical world, and the purpose of that is to help us collaborate across multiple users and multiple devices. And that's great if you're giving a keynote. No, you just want to get a general idea out to people, and it's a new concept to them. But to the people whose logos were on the screen in the first slide, this is not a new concept. They've actually been thinking about it for years. And they're going to tell you that there's a lot more depth behind there. And this is a slide that we used. It was developed by Colin for the Open AR Cloud kickoff meeting in February to tell you just how much more detail you would need to define what an AR Cloud system is. And you know, it's always happening. It's this engine of data. So for much more than just shared experiences, that's part of the value, but there are many other things that you could imagine using a digital copy of. And if you were to go back and ask some companies maybe in the exhibit hall tomorrow or another day, why do you say that you're an AR Cloud company? Then I would suggest that they are going to need to tell you that you know, they're generating data or using data. And I'm having some trouble with the clicker. Okay. And there's another characteristic, which is there's a lot of data, but it's also about combining these on and off network resources in real time. Oh yeah, so that's why Verizon's hosting this track, right? There's a lot of data. This is the concept that I'm going to talk to you next few minutes about the Open AR Cloud's framework to describe the AR cloud, which I developed as part of a report. So there's a lot of data, and that data is linked. It's all connected to other data. It's not just discrete dots. The data is at the core. It's kind of the lava, the molten core at the center of the world. But actually, the analogy is better to call it data expansion, like the universe, like the multiverse. You know, it's rapidly expanding cloud of data, lots and lots of data expanding because we're capturing the real world continuously with all of these different pieces of information that pertain to the physical world. And around that core of data are the AR presentation systems about which we've been hearing for years, and you probably all have one or two, and you've got your smartphone and other things like that. And these are very familiar. They've got optics and a screen of some kind and speakers and some kind of a user interface. And so far we know about this, right? This is still evolving, but we know a lot about it. And we had a description several years ago. I developed this with some other projects about how to describe an AR presentation system. It needs these components. Some of them are always integrated, but this interoperability framework helps you to see all those individual components that I put words on in the previous slide. But now, with the AR cloud, they're infinitely big computing resources, unlimited, like the universe, unlimited power. So they're connected. We don't have to worry as much as we did about the power and battery life of the device. And if we play right and the architects of the networks do their jobs correctly, the whole system is less expensive to build and to operate. So in addition to the AR presentation system, which I just talked about, we're going to add on for the AR cloud purposes an artificial intelligent agent to help you and take some of the complexity and the cognitive load down on this. And oh yes, let's not forget the physical world. The physical world has to be part of an AR cloud framework. It's a part of every AR discussion. It is the subject of the AR. But in this case now, we're going to also introduce for you a few new concepts. The concept of a continuous contextual search, or what I've been calling discovery. I'm not alone in that, but discovery. Discovery is comparing the physical world with the data in the digital world and bringing that connection, making that connection automatically, and as I said, continuously. And since once you've made that connection, it's going to be heavy lifting of compute to render graphics, to remove the graphics, to support your interaction. So I call these special new services that we need the processing zones. They're the workhorses, as I said. They're doing their work continuously in real time, and they use a lot of machine learning. And hopefully they're going to be using a lot of off-device support and technologies. So to borrow a little bit from IoT and the Internet of Things, where we've heard a lot about off-device services, because sensors on the Internet of Things are connected, but they're tiny and they don't have very much battery, and so we have to help them by giving them the support of the edge and the cloud. But in the Internet of Things, we also talk about something intermediate called the fog layer. So for now, we're going to just an example to suggest that there are lots of different places in this off-device system where you could store data and provide computing assistance, okay? The workhorses, the processing zones. So where exactly the processing zones are was the topic of that. Now let's ask for ourselves for a second, what do the processing zones do? first thing is they've got to capture reality. So those sensors are acquiring the physical world and making it digital. Then they're also converting that into a spatial map and in real time assisting the device on behalf of the user to better understand their position, their geospatial position in 6 degrees of freedom with respect to the real world. And they're also tagging and they're segmenting the physical world and making some semantic decisions and making sure that there's metadata that accompanies all this data so that it can be found when you search or when there's an automatic artificial intelligence-based search. So the turquoise blue in the background is that ubiquitous network, that low latency, high speed, ubiquitous network service that holds together these different components of an AR cloud framework that I just proposed. So now let's take those labels and the little segments that I proposed and the logos on the front, on the slide number 2, and sort them by category. So now I've helped you to organize this ecosystem into a slightly more rows and columns oriented view. And you know, I could go on and on and on. These are pretty deep lists, but I expect that with a little bit more time and effort, these categories are going to get crunched into subcategories and more subcategories. And you know, it's going to get more and more interesting. But how do we take those columns and all those simple categories I've defined and bring them to make a business out of that? That's what I was set out to do when I started this talk, right? Is how do I convert these concepts into businesses? And so I think you've heard in other sessions, and you'll certainly continue to hear so at AWE and everywhere you go, that augmented reality is very use case specific and use case dependent. And so defining your requirements, you have to start with what are you trying to accomplish? And that's what this simple graphic is trying to express, is that if you need to be outdoors, you're going to be using different technologies than if you're indoors. In most cases, there are many choices that have to be made. And so if your company wants to target a certain user segment or an industry, you're going to need to find partners that provide the complementary components for that use case. So your use case might include you know, a monocular wearable device with a video processing unit, such as the Movidius built into it. So this is just you know, one of those many but fantastic new designs and new displays that we're going to see more about. We're already hearing more about every day. And then there's, of course, maybe your users can't use a monocular. They need to have a contact lens. Haven't seen too many of those on the exhibition floor yet, and I think it's going to be a while, but maybe that's what's needed. Or you know, if you need a holographic display and a hard hat, then let's combine those products there. And these products that I've just talked about or just shown you pictures of will need to have a on-device capabilities and those off-device capabilities. It's a certainty that a contact lens is not able to do all of the things that an AR user requires. So now to kind of get more into the practical side of opportunity assessment, I want to suggest that if you are looking for partners or you're looking for customers, you need to start with the data. It's this core of the framework. You need to know what kind of data you need, where do you need it, why, and these are possible labels or part of a set of questions you need to ask yourself. And then in the software categories, you would be asking yourself, you know, do my users need to have a combination of experiences coming from different publishers. This is different than collaboration, which is two people seeing the same shared experience. A multi-experience support means that I'm looking at an object or a place, and there is an experience that's coming from a digital asset from supplier or company A and company B, and I can see them both in the same view. Certainly I want to have artificial intelligence to reduce my cognitive load and to accelerate all the things that I need for search and discovery as it goes along. In the spatial indexing, we need to know other different things. Certainly, how are we going to manage those? And this question of management comes over into policies. So these are business policies or government policies, industry guidelines. We need to be able to secure, make sure that these are upheld and there's compliance with all the different kinds of policies. So I don't want to go through every bullet. That would be prohibitively time-consuming, and I think it would defeat the purpose right now. What I want to do is plant ideas in your mind about how you'll go about finding your partners. And in fact, this is a figure that could also help you, which basically says, where are you located and where are your customers located? Would you like to provide products or services in a specific geography? Well, then maybe you need to be considering what policies and regulations apply in that state or that country. This is another figure from the OpenAR Cloud report that was published yesterday, and it's an example. I don't expect you to read these little tiny little, it's an example of a consideration that you need when you are choosing a product or service partner. I just mentioned, and I'll mention it again at this point, that the OpenAR Cloud Association published the first State of the AR Cloud report. It was a wonderful journey that almost 40 people took in a course of 2 months to compile what we know and what we would like to know more about, and to kind of capture where we are today at multiple levels. So it is free, downloadable at no charge. I hope you'll go to the URL and take advantage of this exciting new report. A part of the report, but a part of our lives, is that not all is done. It's not finished yet. There's still a lot of work to do to make this, this AR cloud more manageable and more achievable. So, of course, there's business problems and technical problems. It's unclear what the user experience is going to be, if it's going to be different than standard AR presentation systems. And I believe very firmly, and there are now hundreds of us around the planet, believe that this will not be possible in proprietary silos. Closed or walled gardens will be prohibitive at the scale of the system that we're describing, right? It's universal, it's expanding at light speed. So we can't have one company controlling it all. So in order to have open and interoperable AR cloud, we're going to need to have agreements. They may be standards, they may be open source, but certainly we're going to start with agreements on the subjects of what is the spatial index, how is it defined, and how can I populate it? How will my system get geoposed regardless of where I am at different places? It's probably going to involve an on-device and off-device service, cooperation between the cloud and the device of the user. And we're going to have to come to lots of other agreements, conventions around privacy and security. When is the system turned on automatically, turned off automatically? What kinds of service level agreements should I expect? And so forth. All right, we've got to look ahead. Just a few minutes left here. So if you are one of the companies that was on one of the slide with the turquoise columns and you find that you're not in the column you thought you should be in, then you need to ask yourself, why is that? And don't hesitate to come and talk to me and tell me where I should have placed you. Or if you're not on the map at all, it's probably because I didn't know about you, or it was an oversight on my part, and I regret that, but do let me know so that next time I improve and update that slide, you'll be on it. Secondly, I hope you'll join and contribute your thought leadership to this new initiative, the OpenAR Cloud. There's the URL. Grab the report as soon as you can. And of course, there's a lot more to learn. So this afternoon in Grand Ballroom A and B, there's 2 hours more about AR Cloud topics. And on Friday the 31st in the main hall, Mission City, I'll be chairing a panel about OpenAR Cloud in the future, and I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you.